USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, February 5th, 2024. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at Xcel Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today.
Before you get started here, I know there's this Jimmy spends all this time putting together an agenda and the show notes and everything. What a weird week of college hockey we had. We have too many men on the ice on Tuesday. We've got a little dust up after the game on Thursday with Niagara and RIT, followed by a dust up in Arizona with a line brawl between Lindenwood and Arizona State. Then you got another kind of post-game thing with RIT and Niagara. Those two teams just don't like each other. And then you follow it up with a late hit after the game's over in Anchorage and Fairbanks that explodes the glass. I mean, when have you seen, maybe it's social media, maybe it's us being able to see all this, but what a crazy week in college hockey.
I did was there extra water that was sent to equipment managers with really strange
full moon
contents? Was it a full moon? There was some weird stuff. I'll go back to the too many men on the ice call. That was in BU, Northeastern. BU fans very much up in arms on that one. It's the difficulty is the angles that were shown, even though it was an ESPN broadcast, they do a fantastic job broadcasting games when they send out the full truck. I still don't think we got a good look at what the referees were seeing, and it could be one they could have gotten it wrong. I don't always defend the referees to a fault, but I've been told that if you got a better look at the play a couple of seconds before, one guy's on the ice and the other guy's not even close to the bench, then by the time that you're actually seeing it, they're both kind of within about a foot and a half of the bench. So, it stinks to end a game. Well, it didn't end on a too many men in the ice call. That created a power play for where red hot Northeastern scored, and BU loses. But, those things happen. The rest of the stuff that you mentioned, and the only thing I've actually seen, I guess I saw a little bit of that Arizona State line brawl, but that hit to end the Alaska Anchorage game. I mean, you can't actually see the hit in the social media clip. All you can see is the player that got checked into the boards laying on the ground, and you see the glass had exploded. That was the force of that hit had to be pretty severe. I don't know.
There was a 5-minute major and a game misconduct.
Yeah, and I don't know who handles supplemental discipline in a situation like that with two independent teams, whoever assigned the officials. Maybe it's the NCHC, but you'd have to think that there's some sort of supplemental discipline to go along with that. That could be, that player could be out for a while. That's a very dangerous hit.
Yeah, crazy week. That's for sure.
And I saw some of it, and I will just stay quiet.
Yeah, Ed can't speak on it because his orange-colored glasses will come out. So we'll just keep it at that. I saw it all, and it was wild. Let's put it that way. From the Thursday night game to the Saturday, like I said, those two teams they're not fans of each other right now.
Yeah, and I actually do have a pair of orange-colored glasses, but I won't wear them for this broadcast. I got them cheap on Amazon.
Thank you for that.
Well, let's look at some teams getting into the weekend. A lot of top teams had splits or difficult time sweeping, but some teams had some good weekends. Let's talk about number one BC. Undoubtedly, they'll be the new number one this week. Also, a single game and a win, trouncing UMass Lowell 6-1. We talked last week and on the Edge podcast about teams maybe stumbling into things like the Beanpot, but certainly BC took care of business.
Really took care of business. And actually, the Beanpot teams did well this weekend. 3 wins, a lot of goals scored. I think it was 18 total goals scored by the 4 teams. And Harvard, the only one that was a loss, and it was a 2-1 loss at Quinnipiac. That's not exactly the worst loss, but BC, they are playing unbelievable hockey right now, and the scoring is I don't want to say coming easy, and we'll talk about the Beanpot a little bit later, but right now they seem like a team that has a lot to look forward to down this stretch.
Yeah, that could have easily been a trap game.
Yeah,
looking forward to the Beanpot. Hats off to those teams to go 3-1, especially with because you've got your focus on something in the future, and you could take your eye off the present. And hats off to those teams for doing that. And like you said, a 6-1 game with Gauthier getting a couple goals, and BU getting their wins. I mean, those are pretty impressive heading into the Beanpot.
Also, with a good weekend is North Dakota, a sweep of Miami 5-4 in overtime and 4-1, and Bradbury getting his 200th win on Saturday in just his 331st game. But North Dakota had to come back from a couple down in the third period on Friday and then get that overtime win. So that was a real gut check and a real turnaround, and had to be deflating for Miami, but a huge, huge win for North Dakota.
Absolutely. And congratulations to Bradbury. That's incredible to get 200 wins in that short of a period of time. But I will tell you this, this was a big weekend for Miami. I was following social media pops up there, almost sold out, very few tickets available. And then to have the lead, you thought that this might be a corner turner for Miami, and it just comes back to bite them a little bit. But congratulations to Bradbury, and then to get his 200th the next night after a big 5-4 overtime win the first night.
Yeah, and I want to just underscore Bradbury. This is his 9th season at North Dakota, and they have already clinched the fact that they will be well above 500 this season. Never finished at or below 500 in those 9 seasons. That's quite impressive. And listen, by North Dakota standards, they've actually had a couple of down seasons at that time, but still.
I was just going to say the fans still aren't happy about it.
Yeah, never finished at or below 500. That's quite impressive.
That was a big weekend for Michigan, 4-2 and 4-1 sweep over Ohio State. I think it was Jacob Barczewski with 37 saves in the Friday game, and that keeps Michigan right in the hunt.
I got to watch the Saturday game. I got to watch a lot of hockey on Saturday because I had an afternoon game this Saturday past. And Ohio State had good pushback in the third period. It got that game to 2-1. And as soon as they did, it was almost like you flipped a switch, and Michigan went out in the next shift, scored 2 goals. And that's the sign of a good team, that you can have those responses. And that really impressed me, the way that they found a way to pull away in that Saturday victory on the road, and quite a building that was pretty excited. And I feel like Michigan, they've had their ups and downs this season, especially the early to mid points of the season, but they seem to be playing pretty decent hockey right now.
Yeah, and I mean, what were we last week talking about Michigan? Maybe even, I think it was probably 2 weeks ago, talking about them potentially being on the bubble of the NCAA tournament. Those are big wins to get them climbing. Still a little bit of work to do in the league, within league, but they're getting there. I mean, Michigan State and Wisconsin is the upper echelon of the league right now. And I know we'll talk about Wisconsin lately, but you got Minnesota, Notre Dame, and Michigan all in that middle, all within 4 points. Then you got Penn State and Ohio State bringing up the bottom. So I think Michigan's starting to get right, if you use the word right in quotes, and they put themselves up from, maybe a bubble team to getting a little bit higher. Like I told you last week, a coach told me they're closer. Those Big Ten teams in the middle are closer to getting to the bubble than they are climbing within the top 8, because of how hard their schedule is and where they go with wins and losses.
The other thing to go back, you mentioned we have talked a lot about Michigan of late, and the one thing that we were kind of beating on them for was not being able to close out games, particularly on the back end of the series. So that probably, at least in their mental state, closing out that Saturday game when they got a little bit of pushback from Ohio State, because you got to remember it was definitely Michigan State, and was it either Minnesota or Wisconsin? They had a Saturday night collapse. Michigan did. So I think to be able to get that victory on Saturday probably put some positive thoughts, at least in that locker room.
Well, let's look at number 13, Cornell. They've been sneaking up on us, I guess, or a lot of people. They got a pair of home wins. It's the travel partner system in ECAC hockey. So 5-1 over St. Lawrence and 7-2 over Clarkson. So they're now 11 points behind Quinnipiac in standings with 8 games left. They still have a game in hand with the Bobcats. So now Cornell, an unbeaten streak of 10 games. That's the longest streak since they started 10-0 in the 19-20 season. 8 times they've had unbeaten streaks of 10 or more in the Mike Schaefer era, and they're still in the hunt in the at-large at number 14 in the pairwise.
Yeah, it was just about, that was going to be my point, that don't look now, but they just got inside the bubble. This is a team that was really far outside the bubble a month and a half ago. And we were saying, could Cornell, is ECAC the only way they're going to get a second team is if Quinnipiac loses the conference tournament? Well, if the season ended today, ECAC would have 2 teams in. And the way that Cornell is playing right now, and this is kind of been what Mike Schaefer's done at times. He's put together some of that. You just kind of highlighted it. They can go on some runs, and this is a pretty impressive run right now for Cornell. And if they keep it going, put themselves a couple more wins, and they got some road games coming up. Get some road wins in there. Next thing you know, you're up around 11 and 12 in the pairwise, and you've kind of solidified your at-large bid.
I mean, you look at their schedule. I don't see they're favored in every game. I mean, granted, they're at the top of the league. They're on a hot streak. They're 13th, but they've got Union and RPI both twice, once at home, once on the road, and they've got Brown and Yale. Ivy Leagues obviously battle each other hard, and then they got to go up to the North Country. I mean, there's not a reason they can't go 6-2, 7-1, 8-0, dare I say, in those games,
or at least 7-0-1, or maybe 7-2 or 6-2 with a couple of overtime losses.
Yeah, I mean, that's not out of the possibility, and you hate to, but as a coach, and we've talked about it, as a coach, you're always looking at your schedule going, that should be a win, that should be a win, that should be a win. Okay, that one's going to be a hard one, and you try to plot, you plot out your schedule and say where you're going from there. So I'm at the end. I think I'm going to surprise you with what I say coming up when we talk later about a bold prediction. So we'll go from there.
Omaha got their first sweep of the season. They're ranked number 20 before today's poll, 5-1 and 4-3 over Minnesota Duluth in 2 very different games.
Yeah. And Duluth continues to struggle. I know that this has been a real tough season for Scott Sandelin, and managing injuries and all of that sort of stuff. And, if you follow Minnesota Duluth fans and media on social media, you almost can, it's almost palpable how much frustration they have right now. But Omaha, you need to take advantage of certain series. This is a good time to start taking advantage, and still a long ways to go for Omaha. They're down at 17/18. When you really look at the tiebreakers, they're 18th in the pairwise, probably not getting in at large. They're probably going to have to win their conference tournament, but you start to put some momentum together heading into that conference tournament. There's a lot of time left in the NCHC too to rack up some regular season wins. They don't have to head into their playoffs quite as early as some of the other conferences. So, maybe could they sneak up and sneak into that 14 spot, or, and if everything goes well, they could get into the tournament. You never know. But they're playing the right hockey right now.
Yeah. I mean, we keep talking about the NCHC, and we talk more about Colorado College being on that bubble. Omaha's still got their a way to go, but they're getting there, and they've got some ground to make up, but they've got the ability to do that. So I don't know. Once again, I think we were a little hasty to say that some of these teams weren't going to get in on our buy and sell, that are giving us pause to think a little bit.
Well, does one of these weekends stand out? And we'll also toss in their Holy Cross. They got a pair of wins, 6-3 and 5-2 over visiting Air Force. That puts Sacred Heart just 1 point behind second place, although they only have 3 games left, and some teams have as many as 8 in that conference. But that was a huge weekend for Holy Cross, and it had to be disappointing for Air Force, which has been climbing up the standings. So among those, anybody's weekend sweep really stand out as important.
Robert Morris. Oh, wait, never mind. You can't talk about RIT, and I can't talk about that.
I almost put into the show notes no self-serving comments.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Did I say that out loud? I didn't mean to say that. No, I was surprised at Holy Cross beating Air Force, because Air Force had been hot right now, like hot as like they were on fire ever since the Wisconsin tournament, and that kind of put a little kick back into the standings a little bit, and the Holy Cross pulled away a little bit from Air Force because they were close. Now Air Force still does have some games in hand. They have 3, but they are 8 back, and they're really battling. There's a big battle right there for that 4-5 slot. You got RIT at 43, Sacred Heart at 41, and then the Holy Cross at 40. But like you said, they don't have a lot of games left. Then Air Force, AIC, and Bentley, 32, 32, and 31. Air Force and American International both have 2 games in hand on Bentley. So Bentley's another team that only has 4 games left. So that's what happens with an unbalanced schedule, and we had some postponements because of big storms. So that's kind of where the Atlantic hockey is right now. But I didn't realize that was my head talking when you were talking about the sweeps. I didn't realize I spoke out loud. Sorry, Jimmy.
That's okay. He asked, which weekends stood out. I'm going to say that, to me, Michigan's is the one that stands out. But I'll address that Holy Cross, and they're 7-2-1 in their last 10 and 5 straight wins. That's pretty impressive. And here we go again, where Bill Riga's team. Let's not forget that they marched through the top teams in Atlantic hockey last year and got to the championship game and very close to an NCAA tournament bid. But here they go again. I mean, they're not jumping up in pairwise like we're talking about with Cornell, Michigan, and Omaha. But certainly they're playing their best hockey. Screwy schedule, though. I mean, to now have to finish this month of the regular season, the last month, and only play 3 more games is so strange. And
if they get a bye, then they've got another week off after that.
I mean, to think that you could get into the quarterfinals of the tournament having played just 3 games in the last month.
No, if you get the bye, so they're off this week, and they got 3 games, they could end up playing 3 going into the playoffs, 3 games in 6 weeks.
6 weeks. That's just ridiculous.
Yep.
Schedule. We always compliment the schedule makers. Here, I'm going to beat up the schedule makers and say that is just malarkey.
I can't say a word. I can't say.
At least the schedule makers have retired. So the schedule maker for that season has retired. But I do want to mention one thing about Holy Cross. Last year, the surprise guy down the stretch was Liam McClinsky, the transfer from Quinnipiac in his sophomore year last year. He put up 20 goals, most of them in the second half of the season. He's become a bit of a different player this year, 11 goals and 24 assists for 35 points in 31 games.
And he was just named a semifinalist for the Walter Brown Award this morning.
So watch out for Holy Cross. Well, let's look at teams that might concern us right now. BU, they did win over New Hampshire 6-3, but lost the 2 against BC, and then the upset Tuesday night game in OT against Northeastern. Do we have to worry about Jay Pandolfo's squad?
I'll tell you around 11:30 tonight. And once the Beanpot is in back of them, the semifinals tonight, we'll know a little bit more. And that doesn't mean that they have to beat BC tonight, but they have to have a good showing. They played some decent games against BC in that weekend series a week ago, but they still look like they they didn't match up perfectly with the Eagles. I wanted to see that they can go toe to toe with BC, and if they pull out the win, then I'll definitely say no, they're fine. They're still right up the top, but you just want to be playing better toward the end of the season.
I'm going to blanket this for the next three on the list: BU, Wisconsin, Denver. No, I don't think you need to be worried. They'll be there when it counts.
Yeah, you mentioned Wisconsin 1-2-2 in their last five, an overtime loss and a tie shootout win versus Minnesota. Minnesota is now 0-5 in shootouts this season, and they've yet to score a goal in any of them, which is kind of strange. I don't think we need to worry too much about Minnesota either. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm with Derek. Wisconsin will be fine. This is again, and I'll blanket it for Denver. I'll even kind of mention Denver's 1-3 in their last four, and they got smoked on Saturday. I got to watch a lot of that game against Western Michigan. But all three of these teams, plenty of talent. They all have a little bit of youth, maybe not as much in Wisconsin, but Denver and BU are really young teams. And I just think that they are in tough conferences, and they're going through these bumps. Maybe it feels like the wrong time, but all of these teams have about 3 to 4 weeks to right the ship before the real games count, the playoff games.
And I'm going to go back to Wisconsin. You said they're not really young, but they've got a new coach, and you're going to have a little dip. If you break up the season into 4 8-game segments, and then you got 2 other bonus ones in there, maybe a tournament or something, you're going to have one that's not as good as the others. And this is theirs. So I'm not worried about those teams at all.
Should put in a mention about Western Michigan. Also, that split on the weekend and the big 7-2 win. The Broncos are just 1 point away from home ice in the first round in the NCHC. And that 3, 4, 5, 6 is going to be interesting to watch.
Oh, it always is. And we haven't had a lot of fights to the finish for first place in recent years in the NCHC, but we've had some unbelievable battles for those last 2 home ice spots, which becomes so valuable in that tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking teams that are battling in a tight spot. Good for Western Michigan. They rebounded after they had their 50th anniversary 2 weekends ago against Colorado College and lost both games, both by 2-1s. They had players back, coaches back. Unfortunately, all the coaches, myself, Brent Brecky, Chris Brooks at Clarkson, we couldn't make it back, but you saw the video. But they rebounded really well from that, and those are good signs for the Broncos. And it is tight there. And leading into your next point, St. Cloud, I am worried about St. Cloud. I said no on the first ones. I'm worried about St. Cloud.
Yeah, I mean, they're outside the bubble right now, and they had that split weekend with Colorado College. We were talking about them being on fire right about the semester break.
They were, they were that last team to be unbeaten in NCHC play. Since then, it's just been rough. And then you add in the fact that their non-conference play was not stellar. So you can get away with having some hiccups in the NCHC because of how tough your schedule is, but you need to win those non-conference games. They didn't do that, in spades. So they are in a situation now where they're going to have to kind of probably hustle here down the stretch. And if they were the team that gets left out of the NCHC, it just wouldn't surprise me.
And New Hampshire, they're 3-4 in the last 7. They're 16th in the pairwise. They're kind of hanging on by a thread right now for an at-large.
Yeah. And I think this might be the New Hampshire, a little closer to the New Hampshire people expected preseason when they had them. I think they might have had them 10th in the Hockey's preseason poll. They were unbelievable out of the chute, and they're a good team. But I do think that there's some holes in this team. And as they've had to play some of these tougher opponents, the Boston Universities, a 6-3 loss on Friday night. They had a nice bounce back with a 3-1 win at home on Saturday. But they're probably the team in Hockey East when we talked about who was going to be left out. They're probably in that category of the one I would expect of those 6 that we've been mentioning: BC, BU, Maine. Providence, UMass, UNH. They're the one that if somebody of those 6 gets left out, they're definitely on that list.
Agreed. I think we're seeing what we kind of expected out of New Hampshire.
Well, let's take a pause. When we come back, we'll look at some big or bold predictions, or at least how we're billboarding them. I don't know how bold or big they actually will be, but this podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
All right, well, we're back. And before we take a look at today's Beanpot, some of the big or bold predictions we have on something of impact that may take place before the end of the regular season. So we're not talking playoffs. We're just talking before the conference playoffs all start. What is something, and I'll let each of you decide who wants to go first. What is some big thing that's going to happen, a big, bold prediction people might not even be expecting?
Well, Schools, it looks like he's bubbling over to give his. So why don't you
he changed it on? He changed it on me because I had it. I mean, it does have to do with the regular season, and I don't know. I guess my big thing was that it was going to take 12 to get into the tournament. You're going to have to be at 12. That's going to be my big, bold prediction. I'm just going to go it for the end of the year. Maybe I didn't read very well.
No, you didn't.
I pumped Western Michigan up. I was so excited about this too. I pumped Western Michigan up before. Maybe my Western Michigan education should have made me be a little bit more detailed in my read. But I think it's 12 to get into the tournament. My point. That's where I'm at. I think there's going to be some upsets. I think some teams are going to climb. Some teams are going to get. Then taking it that way, I think there's some teams that are going to get hot, that are playing their best hockey right around the playoffs, that are going to go in and win playoffs to knock some teams out. And you're going to have to be at 12.
I will stay with the show notes, and I'll make something about the regular.
Oh, geez. Thanks. Here we go.
I'm going to stay in the league that I see the most, Hockey East. And about a month and a half ago, we were looking at Northeastern in dead last place and wondering what was wrong with Northeastern and all of that stuff. My bold prediction is Northeastern will find themselves. They will get a first round playoff bye. That's how strong I feel about the Huskies right now. They have 20 regular season points right now to get to 5th place and a first round bye. You only need 20. UConn is there with 23. UMass and New Hampshire have some games in hand. I think that Northeastern, they're going to go on a roll here down the stretch. They're playing really good hockey right now. Their power play is clicking as strong as you could ever want it to. I like the way that they're playing. They've got some decently winnable games on their schedule. They've got UConn twice. They've got UMass Lowell twice. The tough series for them will be going to Orono February 23rd and 24th.
For me, this one is sort of a general one. And I suppose I can even draw something from Jimmy's expertise in betting that I've been drawing from and learning from as we've done the USCHO Edge podcast. I'm putting the over-under right now at 2.5 for teams that are now in first place who will not finish the season in first place in their leagues. So I'm thinking 2 or 3 teams in first place right now won't finish there at the end of the season. And that's because the races are pretty close.
Oh, do you want to give any picks for the teams that are going to not stay in first place?
Well, one league.
He's not going to say RIT. That's for sure.
Well, I told you I got to stay neutral. No, I had
to throw that one back. I'm the doghouse on this segment, so Ed's not going to throw it.
Well, I'll name you 2 leagues where I think it's most likely. One of them is Hockey East because it's so close and so much can happen in the last 3 weeks. The other one is the CCHA. The Tommies have taken over first place after getting 4 out of 6 points from Minnesota State, but that's all very close too. So I think that there are a couple leagues there. Big Ten, maybe. I don't know. Michigan State's got a good position there. And if I take off my orange glasses, Atlantic Hockey is really a toss-up right now too.
Yeah, the one you mentioned Hockey East there, and I guess it's which team are you considering first place right now? By points, it's Boston University. By winning percentage, it's Boston College. So you might be able to hedge right there in the way you set that whole thing up.
Well, with that, let's look ahead to the Beanpot, and we're going to really rely on your expertise on this one, Jim. But the 71st Beanpot, the two contests, one of them is Northeastern versus Harvard. So the Huskies have won 4 in a row, including beating BU and Maine. And of course, they got those 3 power play goals on a 5-minute major, which was what you need to do when you get that opportunity. And Harvard, it's been a tough season, just 4 wins this season, but 3 of them coming in the last 6 games. These may be 2 teams on the uprise right now, and one of them is going to be in the championship.
Yeah, the Beanpot has a rotating schedule, so this is every year you play a different opponent. It rotates between the 3 potential opponents. This is the year that Northeastern plays Harvard and BC play BU tonight in the semifinals, and the Northeastern Harvard matchup intrigues me just as much as BC BU. Harvard, they're not a bad team when you really come down to it. They've got some decent talent that needs to just show up tonight. They need to get good goaltending. That is for certain. Northeastern, I've just talked a lot about them. They're red hot right now, and they're playing their best hockey. Good timing for Jerry Keefe and his squad. But it's, and if anybody's, there's a lot of people that have never watched the Beanpot, never been to the Beanpot. The first game's at 5:00, and that is the game that people roll in for. And they used to actually play it at 6:00 at night, and then the second game was 9. But then that 9:00 start time was kind of creeping toward 9:45, and people were getting out of the Garden at 2 in the morning if you had some overtime. So 5:00. Don't expect a great atmosphere in there. So the teams kind of have to build their own atmosphere themselves. They're going to have to get motivated based on their locker room as opposed to maybe the fans. Northeastern does travel well to this tournament. That is the one thing I will say. But that it should be an interesting game. It just won't be that that breathtaking atmosphere you put with a big game at the Garden.
Before you go to the next game, I want to. There's no way that any team that's playing the Beanpot in the Boston Garden doesn't have energy, enthusiasm, and atmosphere for that game. Yes, there may not be the fans in the stands, but you could take that game and play it in front of nobody, and that's going to be fiery because you're playing for something that's so historic and something so cherished between these 4 schools that you could play it in front of nobody, and the atmosphere would be awesome. So I'm gonna disagree with you on that one. I think they'll get it going, and these are, like you said, our Northeastern's really good right now. Harvard's not as bad as everybody makes them out to be. So, yeah, it's not the sexy matchup that's going to be the second one, but I still think it's going to be a hell of a hockey game. Sorry to cut you off there. You got me going.
I'm glad you made that point. That was, I like that point.
From a coach's perspective, you don't have to sell that game to anybody. We played Dartmouth in one of the best games we ever played at PPG Paints Arena in front of nobody. And and we lost, but it was an unbelievable hockey game. I mean, those kids get up to play in the NHL buildings. They don't know. There's some of them that are never going to play in a building that size again. So yeah, you don't have to sell that atmosphere and that historic rivalry. That's going to be unbelievable. So I don't know much about the history of the Beanpot. And this is, like Ed said, this is Jimmy's deal. So I'll let him talk. No, I'm done.
Well, I don't think atmosphere is going to be a problem at all for the late game with number 1 Boston College and number 3 Boston University. Even if they weren't top-ranked, top-performing teams this year, it's always a big deal. BC's won 5 straight games in 8 of their last 9, including sweeping a home-and-home against BU, and BU snapped a 3-game losing streak with a win on Friday over New Hampshire. This is going to be an outstanding game. BU certainly has the motivation to get some revenge. How difficult is it going to be for BC to beat the same team a third time in 11 days? Does that really factor in? Is that something that's overblown? I mean, Jim, I'll let you take that first. And Derek, you can talk about that from a coaching standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it can be difficult. And I can remember in a number of seasons ago, BU was a fantastic club. It's not standing out which season this was, but BU had beat Boston College 3 times in the regular season. They beat them in the Beanpot. They might have even beat them in the hockey's tournament at some point, but they hadn't lost all year. And then they were in a regional final against BC, and BC smoked them 5-0. So I remember both Jack Parker and Jerry York both making the comment, it's hard to play the same team and keep beating them. This one maybe not as much because it's just 2 and it's 3 games in 10 days, and the first 2 went to BC, but there's no reason that BU shouldn't be able to snap out of it, and get back and win one tonight. It should come down to the skill and the players on the ice. But Derek, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, it's one. I think that's a coach's, like, if you're the one who's won the first 2, we know what we're doing. We've got this is what's worked. This is what we need to continue to do. If you've lost the next 2, if you lost the first 2, that's where you're really selling. You're saying, hey, and you're not talking, this is a number 1 versus number 50 in the pairwise. These are 2 top teams. So you're saying, hey, this is where you're selling, using this they can't beat us the third time. And this is where kind of the mind games come into it. So if you've won the first 2, you're selling it as, hey, we know what we're doing. We've got the confidence. We've seen what's worked against them. If you've lost those 2, you're then trying to say, hey, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. Beat it. Like, look at the NHL playoffs. How often do you see teams, take a sweep or take a 3-0 lead? It's very hard to do. Most are usually 2-1 at one point. I'd love to see the numbers on that, but I digress. But I think it's really hard to beat a team 3 times. And you're going to try to sell that as, hey, we need to get playing because this is also a potential hockey final or semifinal matchup. So let's get some confidence, especially if you're the team that's lost 2 in a row.
Well, that's a look at the Beanpot. Hope you enjoy that. I hope you have a great hockey week. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this podcast has been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen 4, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. And a side note of wisdom, get your plane tickets as soon as you can, too, as prices are escalating like crazy. This has been USCHO Weekend Review.